VirgoCX. Today our topic is going to be on blockchain and stablecoins. So before we start today, I just want to give a little bit of background about the ABC for those of you who are new here. So the Alberta Blockchain Consortium, we are a not-for-profit that's been around for about 2 years now. It was actually started by a local executive here in Alberta named Suzanne West. She owned Imaginia Energy, and she came up with the concept for this organization before she passed away in early 2000 and, what was it, 16? 17. So she was, is it not, the volume's not high enough?
Yes.
Is this better? Can you hear me in the back of the room? Are you good? All right. We'll work on the volume. Sorry, technical issues. So the purpose of the Alberta Blockchain Consortium is we're here to really help support Alberta's technology ecosystem. Blockchain is just one component of a holistic solution to help support Alberta being able to export our goods internationally, to be able to help increase efficiencies, to help create more jobs, to help with startups, to be able to help with our agricultural sector. There's a lot of amazing benefits that blockchain has to offer, and every month when we do our events in both Calgary and Edmonton, we pick a topic that we believe would be meaningful for education purposes, and then we pick a panel of experts to be able to give you kind of an informal conversation about the topic, give you education. As always, we have a bountiful meal for charcuterie and free wine to start with networking as well. We love to be able to collaborate and bring people together. So we're really excited to be able to keep these monthly sessions going, and it's great because we have such wonderful turnouts every time. So we're also, I believe, Virgo is going to do I hope I get this right, what was it called again?
We're gonna do a Bitcoin prediction contest tonight.
There we go.
If you want, I can share everything. Yeah.
So thank you guys for coming here. My name is Will. I'm from Toronto. I'm representing VirgoCX. So VirgoCX is a fiat to crypto trading platform. If you're ever interested in buying using Canadian dollar, you can come visit us. So what we're gonna do today, we're gonna do a Bitcoin prediction contest. So everyone knows today Bitcoin drops 8%, right? So right now, what we're gonna do is, what time is it right now? Right now is 5:40. So if you guys go to virgocx.ca, check the price from CAD against Bitcoin, and predict the price as, let's say 640. Let's say 640, and send the price to my email, will.chen@virgocx.ca. We'll announce the winner at 7 to see who gets the right price. And make sure you guys register on our platform. That's will be the easiest way to receive the rewards.
Is it like Price is Right, closest doesn't go?
Exactly. So the winner will get $100 worth of Bitcoin directly deposited to your VirgoCX account. So you can use that to start trading. Oh, thanks.
Wonderful. Now, isn't that a good reason to come to these events? Now you're getting money. I guess I should sign up for that myself. So a few other things that the ABC does. So what you're hearing today is actually our co-chair office space. We opened this space in July, and the point of this space is actually to bring together blockchain startups as well as established businesses to be able to talk, converge, host events here, be able to network, help grow their businesses forward, and also give them a place where they know that every company that comes in here is also a part of their business ecosystem. So without further ado, we're going to start our event today. So on our panel, we have Dave Bradley. He's the president of Bull Bitcoin, which is Canada's largest, and Dave Bradley is also the oldest Bitcoin broker in Canada. We have Will Chen from VirgoCX, which is a cryptocurrency trading platform. And we also have Matthew Burgoyne, who's a partner at McLeod Law. So we're going to start off our question today, and the first one goes to Will. So Will, how would you define a stablecoin? Sorry, we do have one mic.
Yeah, so stablecoin, I believe a lot of people has heard of it. So stablecoin is kind of what it means, like it's stable. So they don't have like BTC has different volatility, so like it will be goes high in one day and drop 8% like say today. So stablecoins are going to be really stable regardless because it's going to be backed by fiat. So I believe it's the most easy way for you to digitalize your assets to do that. So I would say that's about stablecoins.
Wonderful. So Dave and Matt, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's important to point out, like, they are all pegged to a fiat currency. They're mostly US dollar, but there are starting to be some Canadian dollar ones. And what we see mostly, what people are familiar with as stable coins are coins that are based on public blockchains. So things like the US dollar Tether, for example. But what really is the same concept that is, if anything, more useful right now are stablecoins that are on the private blockchains. So we've had some really innovative and meaningful companies like Guild One in Calgary that actually, without really realizing it, issued a stablecoin in partnership with ATB on the Corda network. So that's sort of just the tip of the iceberg. It's basically anything that you want to do in a smart contract that you need money, a stablecoin might be useful.
Wonderful, thank you for that. So actually, this leads great into my next question, which is for Dave. What kinds of stablecoins are there, and what's the difference?
So the most common one would be directly fiat backed. So that would be just like what I mentioned, where you've got a deposit of Canadian dollars in a Canadian bank account, and the issuing body then issues at a one-to-one basis a coin on a blockchain that essentially gives you a right to those dollars in that bank account. So those coins are basically as good as the issuing body and as good as the bank that holds them. So you're trusting someone. These are not trustless at all. Those so far have been the most useful. The next thing that I would say is, I guess I would define them as like asset-backed. So we're seeing more and more of these where you have a bundle of something like Bitcoin or Ether, and those assets then back an asset that is issued with the goal of keeping it still at a fiat-backed dollar. So that's one of the kind. And then another kind that is that is sort of new and untested is sort of programmatic stablecoins. So this is something where you would maybe have an algorithm that someone has designed that is maybe changing the supply based on the price, and they've just come up with some magic math to keep it at the stable price.
All right, so my next question is for Matt, as the incredible lawyer on our panel today. So, Matt, are stablecoins actually legal? Like, we've heard a lot about the ICOs and illegal securities and conversations around that, and people concerned about putting their investment dollars there. So, are a stablecoin legal, and then who would actually regulate them?
Yeah, no, thanks, Koleya. Can everyone hear me? Is this good? Okay. Yeah, I don't know, what incredible lawyer. I'll try to
He's
meet
our
that
director of
standard.
legal for the ABC. He is amazing.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I do think that they are legal. I think there are some regulators that would have jurisdiction over stablecoin issuers. The first is probably FinTrack. Next June, when the amendments to the regulations to the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering, Terrorist Financing Act come into effect, anyone running a crypto exchange or a digital wallet, maybe even a private blockchain where there's cryptocurrency and fiat being transacted will be virtual currency dealers, and they'll be regulated as money service businesses under the federal anti-money laundering legislation. So I think FinTrack would be one regulator. The more interesting, in my mind, piece is the securities law component, and would the provincial securities regulators in Canada have jurisdiction over companies that issue stablecoins? And I think for some of them the answer is yes, and I think it really depends on the structure and on how the stablecoins are structured and set up. My experience with stablecoins is limited to the fiat tied coins, so I don't have much experience with the algorithmic or mixed asset structure, which I think, for example, the Libra plan in its initial phase with this basket of national currencies was probably a security. There's no settled law on this, so we don't have any written guidance specifically from the regulator on stablecoins, but if you're offering something to the public and the issuer is receiving money, and there's a risk associated with the issuer, and it becomes the issuer's property, and it becomes subject to the risks of the issuer, then it's interesting. Like, while it might not fall into the investment contract prong of the definition of a security, it might be evidence of indebtedness, it might be a promissory note, yeah, so I think the answer is it depends. I think that for a lot of stablecoin projects, just because of the way they're structured, they fall into the evidence of indebtedness prong of the definition of a security under Alberta's Securities Act. So, yeah, but it's weird because when we talk about cryptocurrency, we usually think about the investment contract prong of the definition of a security, but there's a whole bunch of other prongs of that definition that might apply in this case. So the usual characteristics of an investment contract, the expectation of profit, those don't exist with stablecoins, so there's usually no expectation of profit. But there still is arguably a risk tied with the issuer and what the issuer is doing with the money. And if the issuer goes down, people might lose their money. And I think that's where the regulators would want to have jurisdiction over something like that. So.
I love what I just learned there. I didn't really know what a stablecoin was until tonight, so it's very helpful. So actually, this ties in really great because my next question was for you. So VirgoCX is a trading platform with a number of stablecoins. So how do you ensure that you stay in compliance with Canadian regulators? And how do you decide which ones you can deal with? Do you have a vetting process to understand which ones are safe?
Yeah, so to add on to Matt's point, right now, stablecoins certainly can be legal, and most of the Tether coins is issued by Tether company, and they will be what they said is they will be audited by the Deloitte and the KPMG by yearly or by quarterly to do that. And for us right now, what we have on the platform, we have USDT, which is by Tether company. We have USDC, we have PAX. Those are all backed by USD dollars, stablecoins. We also have euros, which is backed by European dollars. So for us, we have a stricted vetting process for every stablecoins to avoid there being a security. So stablecoins can be justified into a security because based on their token structure, the way they use their tokens. So what we have, so we're gonna look deep into their company structure, how they're going to issue it, when they issued it, and what kind of company they're hiring for the audit in case to avoid the lose from the customer. Because we believe the stable coins in the near future, it's gonna be controlled by those huge companies. So we need to make sure that's being all the company has been vetted thoroughly. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. So, Dave, you had mentioned things like fiat collateralized and asset collateralized or uncollateralized programmatic stablecoins. So what are the strengths and weaknesses of those?
So the first kind, the fiat collateralized kind, so far is probably the most useful. The biggest downside to those is that you have to trust someone. So you're trusting the issuer, you're trusting their bank probably, but in a lot of the cases where you might be using those in smart contracts, those are backed by real world contracts anyway. So most of the world doesn't operate in a trustless environment. So those can be very useful in that case. The asset-backed kind, part of the goal of them is to remove the trust or to limit the trust. So if you use an asset like Bitcoin, which is trustless, or Ether, which is trust minimized, then in theory you could have a stablecoin that doesn't require trust to operate. Now, the downside with those is that they rely on the value of the underlying asset. So if you have, these assets that are pretty unstable, Bitcoin, Ether, we lost 8% on Bitcoin today, and if you don't have enough collateral in the contract to back the coin, then you can end up with a coin that's not worth as much as the unit of account. So that could be a whole other issue. The programmatic kind, I have a quote here. I feel like so far they're mostly just mumbo jumbo. This is a quote from Friedrich Hayek, who is a very noted economist, born about 120 years ago. And what he said was, the curious task of economics is to demonstrate to men how little they really know about what they imagine they can design. So this is something that we've seen in, people's attempts to manage complex systems from economies or ecosystems, and I just don't think you can design a perfect system. And that's what these programmatic ones rely on. So we imagine we can build really interesting things, but if that contract's not perfect, then your money's not perfect. And there's not really room for money that is not always money. So I think the most useful kind is the fiat-backed kind right now.
I just add it's difficult to draft a perfect contract.
It is.
Very, very difficult. I mean, the more common stablecoins, the fiat-backed, I think, I just, like I was talking to Will before, and I just really see this all going towards payments, right? And how is it going to make payment systems more efficient? Because when I was first approached by some clients with ideas to launch a stablecoin, I thought, well, what's the point, really? And maybe, well, you could speak to this, but I know that there are all kinds of circumstances where a stablecoin might reduce the settlement and clearance times that, a day and a half or however long it takes to clear a transaction. If someone goes to a grocery store and pays with a stablecoin, and the proprietor accepts the stablecoin, that proprietor is receiving money arguably instantaneously. Like they could pay their employees daily. They don't have to wait for an Interact transaction to settle, for banks to communicate with each other. And I think that's where I see potential in this technology, is it'll greatly reduce settlement and clearance times. Yep. And I think there are a lot of I don't know, I just feel like this ties into the concept of a smart city, and people are paying more for goods and services with their phones. Maybe there's a benefit that the customer could get if they pay with the stable token, and I think there's a big benefit for proprietors. I mean, they could pay their suppliers quicker, the employees. I don't know. So I'm keen on stablecoins, and I think it's a really fascinating area. And I'm glad you're here, Will, because you're one of the few in Canada that have tried something like this.
So add to Matt's point, the payments is next huge thing with the stablecoins, because like everyone knows right now, there's a lot of places like I believe someone using like Cheap on Air, they're accepting Bitcoin, they're accepting BCH. It's actually one of the first huge company who accept Bitcoin is Steam. So anyone play games here, whoever bought games on Steam before,
I'm a
it's like
14-year-old all the time.
So it was actually they accepted BTC to do with like taking BTC for people to start purchasing gaming. But the thing is, the Bitcoin settle was like a huge volatility, and it's usually the settle time, the transform is gonna take like 15 minutes, and when the settle was gonna be for a day, the price can drop. And imagine, like for example, the game is only $60 and the price dropped 50%. So it won't help with the Bitcoin is not helping that much with the payment process. But with the stable coins, as most of the stable coins right now is backed by fiat, that means there's a stable price directly connected with like either US dollar. We don't have any Canadian dollar backed stable coins now at this moment, I believe. But like with euros, they have European stable coins. With those stable coins, they don't have huge volatility. They are all connected with the fiat. That means like you can easily settle it with like a minimum price change at most.
Okay, I feel like we kind of answered my next question here, but just in case, we might be able to expand on it a little bit more. But what kind of use cases could we see for Canadian businesses using stablecoins, maybe outside of just gaming?
So I kind of tend to disagree on the payments argument. I think our payments are pretty good right now. Like it's not that, like our debit network is mostly fine. I don't think faster settlement's that important to most business owners. You usually get paid the next day. I think the bigger use case for stablecoins is with the smart contract side. So when you have a very complicated blockchain-based contract system, and what you're really accomplishing is allowing multiple parties to agree on a series of facts. And most of those facts, once agreed upon, will have outcomes based on the contract that you are operating under. So if you have a properly functioning stablecoin, then you can settle as soon as you agree on those facts. And so a lot of this programmatic logic that we're talking about, and a lot of the things that the ultimate promise of blockchain hopefully will be able to accomplish. We need money. You know, almost every contract that any two businesses will ever execute relies on money. And so that's where I think stablecoins will be most useful.
Yeah, I totally agree with Steve. Because smart contracts are the next huge thing with the stablecoins together, it will make it more useful and in different kind of cases scenarios. So what I'm saying here is another case, because for us, for VirgoCX is the first one who ever listed CAD against USDT, because we're seeing something in the near future is the foreign exchange. So let's imagine, so what kind of case scenarios, for example, we're going to a trip to Europe tomorrow. Let's say I need some European dollar right away. So what can I do? I need to go to a bank. I need to do to buy the foreign currency. But with the trading platform with stablecoins, like what we do, we were targeting to be the world stablecoin trading center. You have all the stablecoins. You have European-backed stablecoins. You have Chinese yuan-backed stablecoins. You have Japanese yuan-backed stablecoins. You have USD dollar. You have Canadian dollar. What you need to do is you can easily trade those tokens on the platform. And then you go to the third party who issued those tokens and trade it one to one. So that means you can easily get those fiat currency right away. So that means it's going to be easily to make everyone for travel for those kind of case scenarios. And to add to Dave's point, yeah, right now our debit works perfect, but for the cross-border transaction, I believe for those stablecoins, that will be helping the most kind of cases for the cross-border transaction and for the cross-border payments. Because usually for cross-border, if it's over like certain amounts, you can take days or like weeks for all those stuff. But with the stablecoins, everything's transparent on the blockchain, well, most of the case. So it will be easy for the payment process to do that.
Nada. All right, so I have one more question for the panel, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So if any of you guys have been pondering what anybody here has been saying, just raise your hand and I'll bring you the mic. So for my last question of today, I'd like to start with Will with this one. What are Canadian companies currently doing with stablecoins?
For now, the Canadian company is not doing much with the stablecoins, I believe. But I believe, yeah. So a lot of Cheap on Air is accepting USDT payments, BCH payments for their airline tickets. Actually, I booked a ticket with BCH today to fly from Toronto to Calgary. So that's what kind of some Canadian companies doing right now. It's mostly focused on payments. And what our company is also a Canadian company. So what we are next step to do is focus on foreign exchange, which is foreign exchange. So yeah, I think that's my thing here.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge is in order to launch a fiat-backed stablecoin, you need a solid banking partner. Ideally, that has a trust company division, and those relationships take a lot of time to build. I agree with Will. Today I know that there is a few stablecoin projects that have been announced, but I don't think any of them have gone live with a CAD token pair. I think there's a few, and I think Virgo, you were saying, Will, you can enable USD token pairing, and I think there's another project in Canada that does the same thing. But yeah, and so you know, it takes a while for the banks to catch up. In order to structure it properly and be in compliance with securities laws, you have to go a very specific route in terms of the structure, and you have to have buy-in from a bank, and they can be a little slow at adopting. You know, not all of them. I mean, obviously ATB is pretty progressive. But.
Yeah, I mean, that was one thing. I had a conversation with James Graham of Guild One about 2 years ago when they did their first royalty transaction, and they were describing what the whole process was. And one of the things that they mentioned was they put some dollars on the chain. And I was like, that's a big deal, guys. That's more important than a royalty contract. Like, you put money on the blockchain. And they didn't really see how important that was, but now what's emerged, you know, we haven't seen a whole lot emerge on the public chain side, but we have seen with networks like Corda, there's an open source project called Corda Settler. And there's basically a consortium of banks that are all issuing their own US dollar-backed tokens on this network, and then allowing anyone building on Corda to use this Corda-based network to settle all of their contracts. So it is kind of a necessity for anything that's happening in the private blockchain world, and I think that's where we're going to see a lot more growth. The next step that I'm hoping to see is some crossover between those two things. So things like being able to use that Corda settler network and then use an exchange like Virgo to move in and out of USDT, maybe in and out of an ATB-backed stablecoin, and then ultimately the biggest thing that you can possibly do with these things is move in and out of Bitcoin, because that's the true international settlement currency that we're all moving towards.
That's right.
There had to be Bitcoin in there somewhere, I knew it.
There had to be Bitcoin.
Absolutely.
I was definitely waiting for that. Wonderful. All right, so we're going to open it up to questions. Ooh, I like it. We already got our first one. You're an eager beaver. Can you make me walk all the way back to you?
Okay, this is for Will. You said that you thought the first use case that you were seeing was Forex, correct?
Yeah, Forex is one of the.
Yeah, Forex is one of the use case here.
Right. So hypothetically, if you were to see a scenario where thousands of people would be suddenly coming to Virgo to be buying a stable currency,
I was happy to see that.
Where would that stable currency originate? Would it be like something to do with the local economy? Would it be something to do like some sort of provincially backed type of currency or a state-backed security? Or like, how do you actually see mainstream adoption coming into stable currencies in like North America?
Yeah, so I believe the stable currency, right now there's a lot of people already starting adopting USDT, because the Tether company is one of the largest companies who do stable coins at this very moment. So what I believe in the near future was people was gonna start trying to put their, as Dave said, when the first people started putting their money on blockchain, it's a huge thing. But in the near future, what people want to see, a lot of places, a lot of venture was starting accepting those digital currency. Imagine there's one day you don't need to pull off your debit card or your credit card or your phone. All you need to do is scan a code which is directly linked to your accounts, something like that. It'll be easy for you to use those digitalize your payments on there. So that's what I believe. The first adoption is when people start, for everyone in the room in the near future, everyone starting having those stable coins in their pockets. And next thing is for the venture starting to accepting those. And when those come together, those crossover, that will be created a huge adoption for the mainstream for the stable coins in the near future.
But does the fact that it's USD, is that what drives it in people's heads?
Yeah, so the USD is going to be one thing, but I believe there's in the near future, Canadian will have their own stable coins. I know there's some company already doing Canadian stable coins. So I know there's 2 projects come to us saying hey, can you list out Canadian stable coins? No, but you need to be really stricted on vetting process regarding that. So Tether company has been vetting through couple years. They have been proved by themselves. Right now we're waiting for some company who can offer us the most stable Canadian stable coins. Euros already have euros there. And HKDT is not as good as for now. And Tether was trying to launch some stable coins regarding the offshore RMB. So we're believing everyone's moving forward towards that. But the most important thing is, as Dave says, those fiat-backed currency need to be trust someone. So we need to see those transparently. We can trust those to make it mainstream adoption.
So my question is about the Canadian government's been pretty open that they are looking at doing their own, they won't call it a cryptocurrency, they call it a digital currency or something, I don't know what they call it. Where do you see stablecoins place being if the government does that? Do you think there's still a place for stablecoins if we go to a digital currency in Canada? And then the second question would be, how realistic is the global reserve digital currency that Mark Carney suggested?
So you want to add some points for the first question, or?
No, that's okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
What I believe is stablecoins is one type of digital currency there. If Canadian governments are starting they're not promoting, but they're starting to support digital currency in the near future, what I believe is stablecoins is going to want to be one of their options. cannot trust stablecoins. Because what happened is the government started supporting that. That means they will be supporting with the banking relationship with a trusted company to do that. So I believe with the government support, the stablecoin is going to be on the next step, which is being more adopted by the mainstream. So the next question was for the global size for like everywhere. So what I can see right now is those major coin, like major fiat currency, is getting stable coins, like USDT, like USD, euros. I'm not sure. Oh no, British pounds don't have any stable coins right now. Hong Kong dollar has its own stable coins called HKDT. Japanese yuan has its own stable coins. But like right now is different companies trying to do different things. But the most important thing is as Matthew said before, is you need to have a really good banking relationship. Back to the first question, if Canadian government is supporting that, that means you will have like Canadian company to do that will have more good banking relationship with them. So for the global side, if government starting saying like, hey, we believe stable coins, well, it's kind of the next huge thing, and the government starting recognize it, that means every bank will start supporting it. So with a good banking relationship, that means stablecoin is going to be increased more and more in the future, and we want to be the first one to step into it.
Yeah, excuse me. One point I just wanted to make earlier when Will mentioned trust, the concept of trust, and how do we trust that, you know, our dollar that we paid in consideration for the token is actually secure somewhere. And you know, my colleague and I have bounced around a lot of ideas at the office, and I think one of the interesting models that I see is if you can get a bank or a trust company that's willing to set up some form of escrow account and have the CAD that's exchanged for the token held in escrow pursuant to a properly drafted escrow agreement that's untouchable. So in other words, if the underlying bank goes down, those funds aren't affected. I think that's an interesting relationship, a pretty secure relationship for a fiat-backed stablecoin, and I think that's one of the highest levels, I think, of trust you could and security you could get. Because I mean, the issue is always the risk with the issuer, right? And I think that's part of the concern about the cryptocurrency exchanges and this talk about derivatives and how you know, if your assets are at risk somehow on the exchange, that's a problem, and I think that business model needs to be regulated. But with stablecoins, I think if it's done properly in a certain way, I think you can enable a lot of trust and securities.
If we're talking about trusting the issuer, I think part of the premise to your question was that the government of Canada would be like the most trusted possible issuer, and I don't know if that necessarily holds true. So maybe the government of Alberta would be a more trusted issuer, right? You might have multiple different coins denominated in the same thing, issued from different places. You might even have a private company that is more trusted than the government of Canada. So there's the opportunity for different options there. On the global reserve currency, we're off the cliff on that one already. It's already going to be Bitcoin, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what Mark Carney or anyone else does, because whatever currency they issue as a reserve, they'll always be able to print more.
Yeah, you can't throw the mic.
Okay, my question is, I think that the problem I see is that you cannot, even if you can overcome this trust problem, that you have an escrow account and things like that, you will face the same problem that money market funds faced in the financial crisis. A stablecoin is essentially a money market fund where somebody issues securities against this pool of money. And we saw that in the financial crisis, these money market funds defaulted. Even though they were 100% backed, they were kind of reputable institutions, there were no fraud, there were escrow accounts, everything. And the reason was that some of the assets in the fund deteriorated in value, and there was a government bailout that saved the money market funds from collapse. Otherwise, there would be total havoc in the economy if that hadn't happened. So I think it's an economic problem on top of just the legal problem or the trust problem, and I don't see how you're going to overcome this economic problem without having regulation, having extra capital requirements, having some kind of extra layer to protect from this run risk on the money market funds. And I would like to hear what you think about that.
I think that goes back to the quote that I read of, the more complex the system you design, the more likely that the wheels are going to fall off, essentially, right? So there's a risk there for sure. And if you were to start, you issue a Government of Canada-backed Canadian dollar. The Canadian dollars themselves are already Government of Canada-backed. So now you've just added another layer of risk, right? So there's always going to be risks in situations like this, and they're going to be almost impossible to define, really, right? So what it's going to come down to is whether you trust that issuer.
No, I just, again, like the concept I'm envisioning is a bit different than a money market fund. It's a fund it's an escrow account that just holds the Canadian dollars that have been provided in consideration for the token and nothing else. And the money sits in an escrow account. So you'd have to have a failure. The Canadian dollar would have to drop in value. I don't know. I can't think of a circumstance. That escrow account would have to be something would have to happen to the underlying escrow account. It's not a basket of currencies that we're talking about. It's just the Canadian dollar. So the Canadian dollar would have to fail, right? You wouldn't get your dollar back, or you get your dollar back, but it would be worth a lot less than it was when you first bought the token.
Okay, the way I see this play out is that you will have the first stable coin offering a little bit of interest, then the next coin is going to offer a little bit of interest, which means that all this money in that escrow account has to be invested somewhere in interest-bearing securities, and that's where the whole problem starts. So some stablecoin provider at some point in time will offer interest, and then is the first problem, and then you're back to the money market fund problem. And if you just leave that in cash, the bank will face the same problem that as the pool gets bigger, they will invest that money somewhere in cash. And if they don't, that generates a huge economic inefficiency, that all this cash is laying around. If they put it in a vault, that's totally creates a lot of economic damage.
But isn't that what we do with gold now, though? To an extent?
Yeah, so for the stablecoins, as I believe, you're right regarding for putting money away with interest and cost of financial crisis. But like for most of case of scenarios is for stablecoins, they're on the blockchain. We're still using that money to do the trades, to make it happen, to use that as a payments processor to deal with all those case of scenarios. So what I believe here is for stablecoins, as Dave mentioned before, there's issues, there's risks. But we have to move forward with those issues. We have to carry on and try to solve all these issues. As we said before, as Canadian dollar, like stablecoins is basically you're trusting. I know it's additional layer of risk, but we are putting this minimize the risk to easy people's life there, to make everything easier, to make everything grow faster. And if we trust with the Canadian dollar, with the USD, with the governments there shouldn't be an issue with the stablecoins. But yeah, there's definitely issues we're going to face in the near future, but I believe we need to carry this on because we're moving forward with that.
Yeah, and I mean, I could see a situation like that happening, what you've described. I mean, if they start paying, I guess the vision I have is that there's no interest paid. Yeah,
stablecoins right now is no interest.
No interest. Yeah.
That's right now is for the stablecoins for USDT. Right now, there's no interest paid. There's a couple of exchanges like Coinbase is trying to run interest based with USDC, but it's for the USDC, not for the money they saw in the vault. Like as you said, there's not for the money they saw with audit by these auditing companies. No, there's not interest there.
So this question's for Matt. So Canadian Tire dollars can be thought of as maybe some type of stable coin, and I was wondering from a legal standpoint, do you know if they were ever had to face any legal challenge? Was that a security? They're issuing their own currency, and is there any kind of precedent around Canadian Tire dollars, which have been around for over a decade, that might actually lend itself to stable coins in the digital and blockchain space?
That's a good question, and you know what, the answer is I don't know. In the case law I've read, Like, I don't think I've ever come across an analysis of Canadian Tire dollars or Calgary dollars. I don't know. Denise, do you? Do you know?
Not aware of it.
No. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I have no idea regarding that.
The FinTrack, the new FinTrack regulations do specifically exempt closed loop gift card systems, which is basically what a Calgary dollar is. It's a dollar you can only spend in one place.
Yeah.
There's a few places you can spend it, but.
Yeah.
There's a company with the name of VirgoCX and VirgoCX wallet, and it's based on Stellar blockchain technology. And this VirgoCX has issued Canadian dollar backed asset in their system. Do you have a figure what that asset?
I've never heard of it.
VirgoCX is most famous wallet based on Stellar blockchain technology. You know, the IBM is using Stellar blockchain for money transfer.
Yeah.
So IBM is not using his own blockchain.
Yeah, I know IBM is not using their own blockchain. They're using Stablecoins blockchain to do the majority of their services because they think there's too waste of time to develop their own public chain there. Yeah, so to add to this, I never heard about that one before, but I'm happy to look into it. But well, as I said before, for all those tokens we want to list it, especially the stable coins, everything has to be through like a really strict vetting process. Right now, there's actually a lot of companies doing stable coins. Like I believe besides Tether, the other famous one is Trust Token. We are actually positively working with them to see what we can do from there.
VirgoCX has announced that you just need to send Canadian dollar to you just need to send Canadian dollar into their account, transfer money into their account, and they hold that money into a escrow account. Escrow account.
Yeah.
I think the only thing I can comment on that one is coming back to trusting the issuer. If we're dealing with Stellar, then it's someone who's issued an illegal security, which puts them low on my list of who to trust.
Ooh, there's lots of questions. So I actually have a question now that we're okay. So in the cryptocurrency realm, a lot of things are going on about like if you leave your money on the exchange. So if you purchase a token, then you leave it on the exchange, and then exchanges get hacked. So we've all seen the hacks we've had with like Quadriga, BitGrail. There have been a lot. Mt. Gox was one of the first ones. So leaving your currency on an exchange opens the investor to significant risk if that exchange gets hacked. Is that same risk there for stablecoins? And if so, are there specific forms of hardware wallets or security wallets? Because in my opinion, anyone that's going to enter into this space, if you're the kind of person that opens up an email from an unknown sender or is, at risk of a phishing scheme, what do they call those? Do not buy crypto. Like you are absolutely going to get hacked. So I'm just curious, since stablecoins are now backed by fiat currency, don't have the same level of volatility, are they still the same kind of a honeypot for a malicious user to come in and want it? So how would someone protect themselves with this?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, they're actually lower risk, depending on how they're issued. So an example would be with the USDT. There was a major hack of Bitfinex where a lot of USDT was stolen. Now, but because it's centrally issued, they actually have control over the ledger, so they can just freeze those funds. So when it is trusted, it gives the issuer a little bit more tools that can keep the users safer in some circumstances.
Awesome. So just gonna let everyone. What time is it? Sorry, I don't have my watch on me.
6:22.
Okay, so everybody has 18 minutes left to enter to win for $100. Just so you know.
I'm gonna check my email starting from like 6:30 to receive the latest prediction.
All right.
Don't try to send me an email on 6:40. I'm gonna. The deadline is 6:35.
All right, so y'all know that because in a few minutes I'm going to be taking that email address off the screen. All right, so to our next question. And then we're going to have just a few more questions and wrap it up. So we're going to have some networking, some wine, some music.
So I have an answer to help with, and I also have a question. I think that what you've alluded to with do you trust the issuer has a lot to do with asking why are they issuing it and what do they stand to gain from that. As David answered, Tether was an emergency response because the exchange had been hacked and they didn't want to lose their customers, so they created Tether as a way to temporarily patch over and compensate people. And now there's Tether, that was the first stablecoin. With the issue of trust token, the TUSD, they issued that token at 99 cents. Or sorry, they redeem it at 99 cents and they issue it at $1. So they gain 1% as an incentive for themselves. And you know, with the bank, when they issue a currency, their brand value is the game theory at play, the full value of their future business, right? What I wanted to ask though is about, I think many of us in crypto are aware of the purchasing power of fiat currency declining, and there's a little bit of a sentiment of return to a gold standard. Have you seen some projects in the realm of commodity metals as a stabilizing asset, an underlying asset? Anything that you like? I mean, there have been a lot. I'm aware that there have been a lot, and just something that maybe the best one you've seen.
There have been a lot, and they're kind of a bad idea in my opinion. They're unstable, the underlying assets to begin with, just like a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin. But then you also have a much harder time auditing the actual reserves. So it's very similar to a Bitcoin-backed version, but worse.
Just on the back to the trust issue again. So imagine I go to a fancy restaurant and I want to park my car at valet. I give them the keys to my car. You know, they park my car somewhere secure, off-site, and I get the ticket. And let's say, for example, there's a fire at the restaurant burns down. My car is somewhere else. It's not subject to the risk of the fire. That's kind of how I see some models of fiat-backed stable tokens, where they've taken the Canadian dollars and moved it somewhere else, somewhere secure. So it's not subject to the risks of the issuer. So that to me, I think, again, is in my mind, is one of the highest levels of security you can get, as long as you have the proper relationships in place. But that's the analogy that I think of when I think of fiat-backed stablecoins, is that valet example. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so for some of the projects I've seen before, I've seen a couple projects where there's someone's promoting to our exchanges, one of those silver coin backed stablecoin. They were issuing like one token with like one like pure silver coin, but I have the same idea with Dave, is like, no, it's not a good idea to do those assets backed stable coins, because first, it's gonna be counted as security as somehow. It's not gonna count as like a stable coin. So not like, if it's counted as security, no, we're not gonna take it. The security token is not gonna be traded on secondary market for that at this very moment. And if you trade it, the SEC will come for you. So I believe it's not a good idea. So for now, until now, I haven't seen any good projects regarding that. But yeah, we'll keep looking into it to see if I actually, you know what, I have seen some coins was backed with real estate. You can use their tokens to buy real estate platform, like real estate by themselves, but still I don't think that's a good idea. But yeah, I believe like those things are growing. If we can find some regulations regarding with the asset, with the fiat, because it's easy, because it's directly connected with the fiat currency. But with the assets, it's really hard for you to regulate, and there's so many stuff under the table you don't know, we don't see, we can't trust it. So yeah, we're still looking into it, but yeah, we should wait.
All right, so we're going to have one last question, and then we're going to wrap it up.
So I'm still sort of confused about regulation, I think. So you said, okay, wait, what am I trying to ask? I'm basically asking, like, how would stablecoin be regulated? Because from my understanding, if it fit into the regulations of an investment contract, then it would be regulated. But then I think in the UK they have like Electronic Payment Services Act, and that's how they would regulate it. So how would we regulate it?
So I think, in Canada we have FinTrack, which is Canada's money laundering watchdog. It's a federal organization. I think it would be regulated under FinTrack. In certain cases, it could be regulated by and under the jurisdiction of the securities regulators. I also think that in addition, most stablecoin issuers would have their own, well, some of them would have their own private blockchain, some of them would use like a ERC20, but they'd have a mobile app, and I think they'd be transacting for a service online, so they'd be subject to provincial consumer protection law as well. So those I see are kind of the primary areas of legislation. So, and I think anti-money laundering for sure, and probably anti-money laundering legislation, and potentially securities legislation and consumer protection legislation, and those are the big ones, I think.
We have a regulator in the crowd you should ask her.
Yeah, we do.
She definitely won't give you an answer though.
I've been sweating because she's sitting right there.
She's just patiently listening to what everyone has to say. It's like, I'm going to trip you up later.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, thank you guys so much. I hope you guys enjoyed our panel. Can we get a big round of applause for our guests here today? Awesome, thank you so much. So, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the ABC and become a member, so we actually have quite a few corporate members. All of the pop-up banners that you're seeing here are members in our organization that support us. We have them featured up here as speakers today. But if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the organization and how to get on board, we actually have a few of our team members here. So Jade Alberts, he is our Director of Marketing. We have Janine Moore, she's with Deloitte, she's on our Board of Directors. We have Haley, he is our Director of Finance, and he's also with EOS Cafe. Dave Bradley is our Director of Technology, and Matt Burgoyne is our Director of Legal. And then we have Amanda is our Director of Operations, Caroline is her assistant, and then we also have, I think Lauren left, but a BD one as well. So there's a great team here. You can chat with us, learn a little bit more about what we do, get onto our mailing list if you aren't already to learn about the future events that we have coming up. And we're also putting in a call for topics. So if there's things that you guys would like to learn about over the next 12-month period, reach out to us and let us know, because we're going to be compiling our 2020 topics for the month. So any suggestions would be great, so we can make sure we give you guys the content that you're looking to hear. So thank you guys again, and we're going to be turning on some music. You guys can stay here for a little while longer. We still have more wine and lots more food, so enjoy.
Oh, by the way, the deadline still have 4 minutes. I have received like a lot of emails regarding the price. Just make sure you're putting is BTC against Canadian dollar instead of USD, because I do receive one email with BTC against USD. So it's BTC against Canadian dollar. Make sure you put it in, and I will announce the winner at 7 o'clock. Or it's up to you. 6:45 or?
No, we can do it at 7, and we actually have a gift to go along with whoever that winner is, and that will be a surprise. So if you win, you're getting double tonight.
That's great. So yeah, make sure the winner, you need to register and verify your accounts on the platform, because you can directly get credits to your accounts. Okay, let's start having fun.